Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Geoffrey of Split Second Decisions, and I thank you for joining me again. Today, we're going to continue on the TLC format, the TLC framework. As we have already talked about, TLC does not stand for tender loving care. It stands for T, a time constraint, L, a lack of time, and now we're going to talk about C, the critical consequence. And this is all within the framework of split-second decisions. So split-second decisions are those decisions that we make when there's a time constraint, the T, the L, a lack of information, and or C, critical consequences. And I'd like to thank you all very much for purchasing my bestseller, Training Your Mind in Split-Second Decisions. Now, let's talk about the C, the critical consequences. Just to be clear, a critical consequence is basically defined as when the decision that you have made or decisions will lead to irrevocable harm, damage, and or significant loss. That's the basis of it. However, context is everything. Context is everything. What may be a critical consequence to you may not be a critical consequence to me. Let me give you an example what's probably not a critical consequence to you, but it is to me. I'm a runner, and that's what I do. I run 3 days, take off a day, run 3 days. Did marathons many years ago. Well, I was at my daughter's softball game. A friend of mine calls and says, "Hey, we're running the rock and roll marathon." I said, "Oh, great. Too bad I can't get in because I would probably try to run it, had not trained. I would try to probably run it with you." Get off the phone. I'm sitting there and my daughter's softball practice ends. I'm talking to the coach. I said, "Yeah, wish I could get in the rock and roll marathon because it happens to be in DC in 4 days." So do you know, he says to me, "I can get you in that." Long story short, next thing I know, I get in it. And I sign up for the whole thing. Usually for my marathons, years ago when I used to do them, it takes me several months, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of time away from the family as well, a lot of time away from my business as well. But this marathon was in 4 days. And I kind of talked my way into it. Okay, it's a full marathon, but I had the option of doing the half. I'm kind of competitive. I'm getting to the story. Show up to the marathon, and the race starts. Trying to decide, am I going to do the half or am I going to do the full? I'm feeling pretty good. I get to the 13-mile mark. It's coming up. I got about, at this point, it's about, I have about 5 minutes to make up my mind. Do I want to do the full or do I want to do the half? I'm almost at the 13-mile mark and I'm feeling good. And in my mind, it was a split-second decision because there was definitely a lack of time. A time constraint on there. But it was a critical consequence to me. Let me tell you why. Because I was feeling good and felt like if I continue, I can do this. If I stopped at the 13-mile mark, said, I'm done, I knew that for the next several days and then weeks, I was going to be thinking, why didn't I just finish the marathon? I could have done it. And then I would have known, and then I knew me. I was going to sign up for a marathon and I was going to train. That was going to take a lot of time. It was going to take me away from my family. It was going to take me away from my business. And in my mind, that was a critical consequence. What's my point? Long story. The end of the story is I went ahead and finished. I went ahead and did the whole thing. What's my point? the critical consequence is not the same for everybody. Now, as it relates to business, I was an executive. I was at this organization, pretty large organization, and had to go to the board meeting. And I went with a person above me. There was a person above me. I was at the board meeting, and I was one of those. There's a big table, and you have chairs sitting behind the big table for those who were less high up executives. I was there. And me and my boss, we had some different ideas about the projections. The projections were going to help determine the budget and how much money that we got. And he saw it one way. He wanted to be very conservative because he didn't want to make any waves. But I knew that I was going to have to implement that. But fine, he's the manager. That's what we do. He's the one in charge. And I'm under him, so that's what you do. You've got a rank order file. We're at the meeting. He presents the projections, and they go back and forth. Do you know that the chair of the board, who knows I work under him, stops and suddenly looks at me and says, what do you think? That's a split-second decision. Why? Because there are critical consequences. There's critical consequences from two reasons. One, I have my boss here who knows I disagree, and I've made it aware, so it's no secret. But I also know if we follow his line, follow his projections, we're going to fall short, and that's going to come on me. And now I've got the chairman of the board who's purposely bypassing him, saying, what do you think? And so I looked at my boss. It was a split-second decision, and I said, Mr. Chairperson, are you asking me my opinion? Because I work with he says, no, I'm asking you your opinion. And I gave him my projections, or the other set of projections. They weren't mine because we had both worked on them jointly. He just had a different perspective. So I shared with him the ones that I was more aligned with. And in the end, we went with my boss's perspective. We went with that way. But that was a critical consequence. I mean, there were critical consequences involved. A few things. My boss could have at the end figured out a way to get rid of me. But then two, to go with him, it was going to put more pressure on my team, which was going to make us, putting us in a position where we were not going to be as effective possibly. What is my point? You never know when the split-second decisions are going to come, and the critical consequences, it has a context, and it may be multifactorial. It just may not be one. But at some point, you may just have to make, at some point, you're going to have to make a decision one way or the other, and it may not always be the most optimal decision. And context is everything. Context is everything, and true. Whether or not there will be irrevocable harm, loss of life, loss of jobs, loss of contracts, loss of businesses, significant loss, those are all aspects of the critical consequences. So thank you. Thank you very much for listening to the critical consequences aspect of the TLC framework. And whatever you do out there, decide. The worst thing you can do is not make a decision. No decision is a decision. I mean, when you fail to make a decision, you've made a decision. You've decided to let life, the environment, circumstances, or someone else make that decision for you. And if it's someone else, perhaps that someone else is less skilled or at making those decisions than you. It's best for you to make the decision, and if it did not give you the optimal result, make another one. Please Follow me on YouTube at Dr. Geoffrey. You can follow me on LinkedIn at Geoffrey Mount Varner, as well as you can go to splitseconddecisions.com. Again, splitseconddecisions.com. And whatever you do, be safe out there.